Hey everybody, what I wanted to do here with just a really brief feedback explainer was to kind of blanket hit everybody here and let everybody know kind of a little bit about what it is that I mean when I put some of the comments into your um, the comment section in your assignments when you see them in Eagle. So what I have here is not necessarily indicative of, number one, things that everybody is going to see all the time. That's not necessarily the case. Number two, just because something is wrong or incomplete or incorrect or maybe not standards compliant, so it doesn't really follow pseudocode along, doesn't mean that it's irredeemable. One of the things I'm going to mention later on, and I just want to mention it now so that I can mention it as many times as possible, is with every assignment, for the most part, with every assignment. So this does not necessarily mean like your midterm, your final, or a couple of the projects down the road. But with every assignment. So for example, the pseudocode 1, the chapters 1 through 3, the chapter 4, end of chapter material, things of that nature. Everybody's going to have a one-time shot at resubmitting things for half your points back. So just for example, let's say that something is worth 20 points and due to the way it is that you structured your responses, the first attempt you earned a 10 points out of 20. What you will see is in the comment section you'll see rather me saying something to the effect of, get those changes made. So I'll actually give you hints as to what the issues are with your pseudocode that led to that reduction in points. And I'll say message me when they're in, so you can resubmit it and message me. If you do not message me, I am not going to go back and look for these. What I'll tell you the strange quirk is in Eagle is that if you just submit a file, I do not get a notice that you have done so. If you leave me a comment on a file, I do not get a notice that you have done so. I actually would have to go through and go back into everybody's comments on an assignment by assignment by assignment basis, on a week by week by week basis, to find out that you have resubmitted something. And what I'll tell you is, I'm not going to do that. I am putting the re-evaluation of points back on your plate. So message me when you have resubmitted those files, and I will go back through and whatever the re-evaluation would be. So if I'm going to scroll back up here to the top, let's say you nail it, you get it out of the park, and this time, your resubmission would have earned you 20 points. So that means you're going to get the lasting consequence of that is going to be a 15 out of 20 on that assignment, because this time I'm giving you half the points value back between 10 and 20, which is 5, so that's 15. So that's how that would go. I'm going to highlight that again briefly again later on. But these are some of the comments you're going to see certainly here already on the pseudocode 1 assignment, but potentially on any other assignments that you have down the road. And again, not all of these are going to apply to all of you, but it's always good, I think, to have a little bit of insight as to how it is that the instructor is going to be evaluating your material as we go through. So first and foremost, pseudocode isn't about making assumptions. It's about detailing every step it is you need to complete a task. So instead of saying things like get order, so if you'll recall the pseudocode 1 assignment, there is get an order from a customer at a fast food establishment, essentially. Well, that's leaving a lot to interpretation for the next developer in the chain. The more you leave to interpretation, the less the implementation is going to look like the solution you had developed. So, don't just assume they're going to get an order. Walk the next developer through the chain via pseudocode, walk them through exactly the procedure that you had entitled, envisioned rather. Next, these are correct math or maths, but there's no communication between the program and the user. What is something like that going to look like? You're making assumptions. It would be something like total equals number 1 plus number 2 plus number 3 plus number 4 plus number 5, display total. So where are those numbers coming from? Is the user entering numeric data? Is the user entering text data as numbers? So ONE, TWO, THREE, etc. That is not what we are aiming to do here with pseudocode. We are making dangerous assumptions there, and you are putting a lot of faith in whomever the next developer in the chain is going to be, and that turns out to be honestly fairly dangerous. So display and get are really here to lead your user to a good, satisfying completion of your program or procedure. Those displays or prompts and gets are also here to help the next developer in the chain develop a solution that you would actually envision that they were going to actually implement for you. Along those lines with the math here, I can tell you that not everybody knows how to take 10% off of something. That math won't always hold up with the next developer in the chain. Even here with take 10% off an item's price and display the new price. Number one, I can tell you, having as a youth worked in retail, I can tell you that not everybody knows how to take a price and apply a discount. That means, or it leads me to believe at the very least, that not every developer in the chain is going to know how to do simple maths, let alone complicated math. So if we have some piece of math that we are going to do, a 10% reduction in price, that's maybe not the world's most complex interaction. However, if we are going to do some engineering things, I'm going to put exclamation points here because I can tell you I don't want to be involved in that. Engineering in very, very short order gets to have much more complicated equations than I want to think about. If we have things like nursing, they have much more complicated interactions than I even want to think about when it comes to, what kind of dose should we use after how many hours to be correct. I don't want to be responsible for that, because what I don't want to be is somebody who is putting together a terminal, a point of contact someplace in a hospital, where a doctor is going to come through and look down at that and say, okay, we have a patient who is just hanging on to life here. How much medication do I give them? Way too much! And the next thing is we're going to kill them. That is not what I expect to have to want to do. So do not assume that the math that you can suggest, so take 10%, display 10% of total. Take the time, go through and actually do the math, and in so doing you will get the correct answer from the next developer in the chain, as opposed to a corpse someplace, which is unfortunate, but that is not an exaggeration of what could potentially happen. Next, for all of your gets, what you really want is a display or a prompt immediately before it, so that the user knows what you need them to enter. So what would that look like? That would look something a little bit like this. So what I'll tell you is, this also is good logic based on what the text would have you do. But what I'll tell you is, we are seeking to do better with our pseudocode than what the text is having you do. So if I have, in the pseudocode 1 exercise, for example, prompt an operator for number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, add the numbers and display the total. This, technically speaking, is good pseudocode according to the book. I have the name of my module, I have the end of my module. It's letting me know via pseudocode that I'm going to prompt the user for 5 numbers. Great, and it's got the variable names here that I can use. It's going to read those numbers. Great. I mean, technically speaking, that is correct according to the text. And here's the correct math, which is entirely what we want to do. But what I'll tell you is that leads to the next developer in the chain being able to make incorrect decisions based on what your pseudocode looks like. Better yet, and this is represented in those pseudocode terms and pseudocode style videos and podcasts and screencasts from before, is we want to clearly communicate to the user what it is that we are looking for. So with a prompt, this program will take 5 numbers from the user, add them, and display their total. And then we have prompts for 1 number at a time. So we have a prompt followed by a get. We have a prompt followed by a get, and so on and so forth. Then we have the math here clearly demonstrated for the next user, or the next developer rather, in the chain. And then we are displaying the output, the actual work that was being done by our program here is actually being output. This block of code is much more clear. I will admit to you, is this adequate as far as the text is concerned? Yes, but we need to go past that. We need to produce solutions that are much more accurately reproduced by the next developer in the chain. This is going to be accurately reproduced by the next developer in the chain because I am, or this developer is, telling you what the prompt should be. It is telling the user what the aim of the program is. It is telling the next developer in the chain even what to call the variable names so that they're usable. This leads to far better process time, runtime, compile time implementations than does this adequate but not good enough. So here in the beginning, when I see good text logic but not necessarily up to the standards that I'm going to hold you to, which would be more like this, I am going to let you know in the feedback that, hey, we're going to want to take this and make this a little bit better. So small changes there, but again, you have the opportunity to go back to make those additions, corrections, re-implementations, and get points back for them. Next would be you're making assumptions that you can't make. You are skipping steps, you are lumping things together, you are actually just taking a process and giving it a name without discreetly kind of enumerating what those steps are. So again, for get food order, that's really not good enough. We need the actual steps there. How big is an order? What can you order? Where's the menu? Things of that nature are things you really do have to go through because, again, the more clear your pseudocode logic is, the easier it is, the more repeatable that is going to be for the next developer in the chain to actually produce that correctly. Other things to think about: what is the logic for the heaviest apple? This one I knew was going to give many of you fits because you and your brain do what is called thinking in meta. You know that, okay, if I give you 3 apples, you're going to be able to look at them, you're going to take a guess as to which is the heaviest apple, you're going to pick it up, and maybe you'll pick up another one to confirm, hey, this is the heavier apple. Sure, that's absolutely the case. But what potentially you really don't appreciate is that really your brain is putting together smaller processes, and those smaller processes have discrete steps involved that your brain really goes through to be able to do that. So we need a mechanism, and we need to undo that meta mechanism that our brain goes through, and we need to get concrete sequential steps of the smallest order that will lead us to the kinds of actual logic that we're looking for. what your brain really does, and even with, as high order and complex as we believe that our brains are, we take apple 1 and we compare it to apple 2. We could potentially spell that correctly. So I'm going to make a comparison. Apple 1 and apple 2. Which is bigger? It turns out apple 1 is. Great. Now I go to the next one. I'm going to go apple 1. And I'm going to compare it to apple 3. This time around, it turns out that apple 3 is actually bigger. Great. What's the next thing I do? I'm going to check apple 3, and I'm going to compare that to apple 4. This time around, it turns out apple 4 is bigger. Now I have the biggest apple. How did that happen? I didn't just look at them and make a decision. I had to do actual comparison. 1 to 2, I have an answer. 1 to 3, I get an answer. 3 to 4, I get an answer, and I proceed that way. These are the kinds of reduction in steps that you are going to have to get accustomed to making. Otherwise, we get really bizarre implementations on the other side. And I know that the first reaction you are going to have to making a peanut butter sandwich is going to be, hey, I know how to make a peanut butter sandwich. That's not an issue. Clearly, everybody knows how to do this. No, clearly not everybody knows how to do this. If I was to give, the task of making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich to my 3-year-old, I'm going to get some implementation there, but I'm maybe not going to get a perfect implementation, right? I'm going to get jelly all over the counter. I'm going to get peanut butter in the jelly jar or jelly in the peanut butter jar, whichever one of the two of those that he did first. I am going to get 1 piece of bread or 7 pieces of bread, or who knows what's going to happen. More probably he's just going to go for cookies instead, right? So just saying make peanut butter sandwich is meta, and if I say that to an adult who's ever had to make a sandwich for themselves before, they're going to go, yo, I got this. I got a peanut butter sandwich, no problem. But if I give this to a machine and say make peanut butter sandwich, that's an imperfect implementation. What we need is the stepwise implementation of this. So as small a set of discrete, concrete, sequential steps as possible to make the best output that we can get possible. Oftentimes I'll say you just need more detail throughout. You don't want to leave anything to chance. So where potentially I might mean that. If I'm asking you for your age now, so I can tell you your age in 20 years. If we provide a prompt that says, this program is going to ask for you for your age and tell you how old you'll be in 20 years. This way, if when prompted the user for an age, they don't just say teenager, they don't just say, whatever, middle age, they don't say octogenarian. We want to be able to lead the user to a more stable interaction that we have. And where you'll see more detail throughout, I'll give you hints as to what that really is referring to. And again, this does not necessarily indicate everybody, but I think that at some point in time this will implicate everybody, is I am well aware that I am going to provide you with implementations that you are going to look at and just go like, what the hell does this really mean? For some of you that meant, I believe it was problem number 5, to draw a square on the screen. And some of you just said, nah, I don't know. And you just kind of like shrugged and shrank away from the problem. Don't do that. You are, at some point in time in the future, when you are the next developer in the chain, when you come into a situation and you are the subject matter expert, or you are interviewing the subject matter expert, and the subject matter expert tells you it's simple, you just draw a square. you are going to need to know what the heck that means. If they were to tell you, okay, now you need to draw a dodecahedron, what the heck does that even mean? It's a shape. I don't know how big the shape is. I need to have a little bit of guidance onto how to actually implement that correctly. So what does that mean? Outline the problem. Think your way through the steps. Actually grab marbles and do it step by step. Oftentimes, the best way to figure out what the concrete sequential steps are in the programmatic design here, or the process design here, is to actually go through and interact with the physical analog. So whatever the physical implementation is. So if it's getting marbles or getting apples or getting something that you can have as a stand-in for marbles or apples, do it. If that means interacting, with a fast food order, think your way through a fast food order. You have very probably, even if it's not an exact one-to-one experience, I know how to draw something. I know how to draw a square, potentially. I might not know how to draw a dodecahedron, but I could probably figure it out. If I find something that's a little simpler, that I can touch, that I can tangibly feel, that I can move my way through. Don't just, kind of whiff on one of these responses and go, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I thought about it for 5 seconds and I just didn't do it. Because one of these days you're going to be, involved in a process that is going to do exactly that. Find an expert, find a subject matter expert, find something, find a physical analog that'll get you there. There are no problems that cannot be solved if you do not break them down into smaller pieces, solve one problem at a time, and build your way to a much larger process. So break it down. And frankly, when this happens, don't just shut down, especially here. It's easy when you're away from the classroom to just go, I don't know, and don't do anything about it. Reach out. That's the whole reason I'm here, is to try and get you there. I might be annoying to try and get you there by asking you questions, but we are going to get you to where you need to be to actually solve these issues. And finally, one of the most common pieces of feedback you're going to see is get those changes made. Message me when they're in, because if you just post a comment, I will not get it. Do recall, if you just resubmit an assignment, that's fine. I am never going to see it there, which means you are not going to get reevaluated for it, and I ain't going back. And then you're going to come back to me later on and complain at the midterm when I say these have to be in by, this date. You're going to come back to me and complain at the final when I say all resubmissions are due by this date. And you're going to say, I have that resubmission in there. You can check the date. And what I'll tell you is, did you message me? And if you say, nope, I'm going to say, too bad. Look, that's just the way it has to be. I have gone the other way before, and I spend, innumerate hours every week then going through assignment by assignment by assignment, student by student by student, comment by comment by comment, to try and find 1 or 2 resubmissions. I don't have time for that. That's on your plate. Message me when they're there. I will reevaluate those changes that you have made, and you will earn back half of the new potential total. So just in case I have a couple of jackwagons out there listening, that means you can hand in something and get a 0, hand in another something with a little bit of content and, get half the points. No. It's half of your earned total potential out of that. So there are no free points to be had here. For the most part, that's what you're going to see, especially here for the first week, in the way of feedback. But at least this way, you kind of get a feel for how it is that, I interact with what you hand in, and how it is that you can interact with the feedback and the comments and things of that nature that I have given back to you. So hopefully this helps with everything, not only just here with the first two assignments, but with the assignments coming all the way through the rest of the course.